In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So, does anyone remember what we're talking about? Samson. Okay. What have we read so far about Samson?
It was with that woman from the Philistines, and then there was the lion with the honey, and it was dead, and he wasn't supposed to touch it, and then there was this riddle that he gave, and then his wife got the riddle out of him, and then he's like, all right, forget you. He gave his wife to his best man, and then left.
Right. Okay. That's a good summary. So, one of the main themes that we've said that applies to Samson is that one, Samson was chosen by God to be a judge. We know that. Why? Yes, but who?
Went to his mom.
Yes, because the angel of the Lord came to his mom and told her, who was barren, and told her that she would have a son and that he was to become a Nazirite, and he was chosen by God, right? So we know that he was chosen by God. That's an important thing to keep in mind, all of this. Number two, we see that a lot of the things that Samson has done, a lot of the decisions that he's made have been what?
Pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are some of the bad things that he's done so far?
He fell for a woman outside of his group.
Okay, so he wanted to marry a Gentile woman, which that's explicitly against God's command. Okay, what else?
He touched the dead animal.
He touched the dead animal, and as a Nazirite, he's not supposed to. Actually, nobody from Israel is supposed to, but he specifically is because he's a Nazirite, it's like a very high standard of behavior, and he did that. Okay, what else?
Killed 30 people.
Okay, well, so he killed the 30 people, right? But that's actually what God has made him a judge to do. He made him a judge to destroy the Philistines, right? Because this is in response to the people of Israel crying out to God because the Philistines are oppressing them. So if you remember, when it said that Samson spoke to his father and told him, I want the woman who was a Philistine, and his father said, is there no other woman in Israel that will satisfy you other than this woman? And he said, no, get her for me because she pleases me well, right? And so it said what? But they did not know that this was of the Lord, right? And we spoke about what does it mean for this to be of the Lord? Of the Lord, and this is a very important theme that we find in this whole story of Samson, it's not that God is saying that the choices that Samson is making are good choices. It's not saying, yes, God wants him to go marry a Philistine, right? But it's saying God is using even his own weaknesses, his own wrong choices for the ultimate goal that he is a judge for, which is to destroy the Philistines. So keep this in mind in everything related to Samson, that even though we see him making so many poor choices, right? And one of the other things of his weaknesses is his lust, okay? His lust of the flesh could be like sexual lust, could be any type of lust, right? Even the idea of the honey, right? When there was a dead carcass with honey, like bee honey inside, and he took from it and defiled himself by touching the dead lion. Why? Because he wanted the honey, right? This is like a symbol of Samson, and it's a symbol of sin, right? Because essentially that's what we do with sin. Is sin has the dead carcass and sin has the honey. And we're like, maybe I can take the honey without getting defiled with the dead carcass. But it can never happen, you know? You can't have one without the other. You can't just get the good stuff and not get the bad stuff with it. And that's essentially the story of Samson, that we see the theme in his life over and over again, is that he is so, his weakness causes him to keep making poor choices. And yet, despite all of the poor choices that Samson makes, even all the way to the end, and we'll see that today, despite all of those choices, God is still able to achieve through Samson what it is that he called him for. Okay, and this is an important lesson for us because God calls us to do different things, and we all have weakness, and we all fail at doing those things. Just because we fail and just because we have weaknesses doesn't mean that God cannot achieve through us what he wants to achieve. Okay, and so keep that in mind when we continue studying today in Judges 15 and 16, the story of Samson. Any other comments or questions before we want to start? Okay. After a while, in the time of wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat. And he said, let me go into my wife into her room. But her father would not permit him to go in. So who is this wife?
This is a new wife.
Is it a new wife?
Oh.
What had just happened last time?
He gave his wife away to his best man.
So it said what that she went to his best man, like she was married to his best man because he was at his wedding feast, and at his wedding feast is when he posed a riddle and he said to the 30 Philistine friends that if he gets the riddle right, they will give him 30 changes of clothes. If they get it right, he's going to give them 30 changes of clothes. And then his wife deceived him, told them the answer, and now he realized there was an answer that he got from her, and so he was offended by his wife because she deceived him. Okay, so it says what that he left. Okay, but in Samson's mind, he's still married to her, still his wife. Maybe after some time, he calms down. It's like, well, I still want to marry her. Okay, so he comes back now. He says what? In the time of wheat harvest, and it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat. Like he's coming to bring a gift, and he wants to still be with his wife. But what does his father say? His father does not permit him. Okay? His father does not permit him. Now his father thought, or her father, sorry, thought that he doesn't want anything to do with her anymore because he left. He left after the wedding and he left the whole place. Okay? Her father said, I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore I gave her to your companion, which was the best man at his wedding. Is not her younger sister better than she? Please take her instead. Yeah, so this doesn't happen nowadays, does it? Okay, but at the time, women were seen more as property. And this is actually, are you familiar with the practice, like here in America at weddings, where the father gives away the bride? Familiar with this? This tradition actually comes from the idea that women are the property of their father, in the sense that the father is coming to the church and he's saying, this girl belongs to me and I'm giving her to you, right? Almost like a transaction. Like, okay, she belongs to me and now I'm selling her to you. That's why like there was like the large amounts of dowry that would be paid. It's a transaction, right? And that's the way that this was kind of seen, as a transaction. That's why in the church we don't allow this idea of the father giving away the bride, because it's actually demeaning to women. If you understand like the reason why this is done, it's actually like historically it's demeaning. So actually in the church, what do? The priest is the one who takes the traditionally the priest is the one who takes the woman and gives her to her husband, because the church is the one who is uniting them together. Okay, that's why actually in the wedding ceremony itself, if you're familiar, the priest is the one, like during an engagement, when the priest is presenting the rings to the couple, the man puts on the ring of his fiancée and vice versa, right? So they put on each other's rings in the engagement. But in the wedding, the priest is actually the one who puts on the rings, not each other. Why do you think that is?
Church.
The church unites them. And when the church unites them, they cannot separate, right? Because in the engagement, you still have freedom to separate. You don't have to go through with the marriage. It's a contingent thing. But with the marriage, the church is saying, you are now married. The church has married you, right? So it's something like permanent, okay? So again, this idea that it's like, okay, well, she's married now, so take this one instead. Okay, this is...
I heard that the tradition has come from Genesis 2, and like it says that God brought Eve to the Adam.
Yes, exactly. So now what do you think Samson's going to do? Now Samson's even more enraged than the first time. It says, and Samson said to them, this time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them. He's like saying, now I have even more justification. Remember last time when he was deceived by his wife, he went and he killed 30 Philistines. Okay? Now he's saying, I have even more justification now to harm the Philistines. Another point of note here is when Samson decided that he wanted to go to marry with the Philistines, okay, what is he really thinking? It was out of his lust that he fell in love with this particular woman, and he told his father, "Get her for me by any means." That's all he's saying, his lust. Okay, but he didn't think through what he was actually deciding. Like his family is now going to be Gentiles. He who is the one that's supposed to be the judge, chosen by God to free the Israelites from the oppression of the Philistines, You are gonna go marry the Philistines? It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense for him to be thinking this way. It's because all he's thinking about is his lust. This woman, I like her. I want to be with her. Okay, he's not thinking, well, my in-laws are going to be Philistines. My brothers and sisters-in-law are going to be Philistines. They don't believe in God. They worship idols. They're like, we have nothing in common with them, and yet he is uniting himself with this woman, which means he is uniting himself with her family. Again, nowadays, sadly, a lot of times we think this way, and especially when it comes to marriage. Two people, they like each other, they feel very enamored with one another, they feel like it's very good, and yet because of that, they ignore so many other factors that are really going to be troubling, that are going to cause so many problems, and they don't want to look at it, they want to pay attention to it because of what? Because of the feelings of love that they have for one another, right? We have to be very objective when we make these decisions, because this is, again, permanent, this is lifelong. And Samson, even from his wedding day, begins to suffer from this poor decision that he made, which was to marry this woman. Okay. So what does Samson do now? He is like enraged. It says, then Samson went and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. Okay. Very unique, interesting technique he has. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. So he lit these foxes' tails on fire, let the foxes go running in the fields, and so everywhere that they went burned.
I have a question. Why is he so cruel?
Well, you can say this is another one of his characteristics, is he's very intense. Okay, he's very extreme. Okay, in what he does, right? He goes from an extreme of this and extreme of this. Right?
Why is that okay?
His goal, his God-given purpose was to destroy the Philistines. Okay, he was not like the others. Like the other judges. It's like God would come to him and he would choose them, and then he would be like, I'm choosing you to be the judge and go and defeat your enemies. And then they would have a campaign and an army and soldiers, and they would get together and then they would do it. Okay, right? This is not Samson. And that's what I'm trying to say is like the story of Samson teaches us something about how God can use people. Samson is not this type. Samson is not this type where it's like he's a military man and he's going to go and have an army with generals and leaders and he's going to go on and this. No, he's kind of a wild man, a little bit, right? He doesn't think things through. He is very intense in the way that he does things, in his emotions, in his strength, in so many ways, right? He's impulsive. He's just, I have a feeling, I'm going to act on the feeling. I want this woman, I'm going to go get the woman. I have hatred, I'm going to go kill 30 Philistines, or I'm going to set foxes on fire, or whatever the case. So at no point here are we trying to say that Samson's techniques are the right approach. But again, if we read back to that verse that says what? They did not know that this was of the Lord. That God is going to use Samson's personality, Samson's techniques, to achieve the end goal, right? Doesn't mean that God sanctions everything Samson is doing. It doesn't mean that God wanted Samson to go marry the Philistine woman. But God, knowing Samson and knowing his choices and what it is that he's going to do. To me, this is like another way that God is glorifying himself through this. Why? Because, when we read the story of Gideon, what's the defining characteristic of Gideon's story? To show the signs, but then when he went to war, how did that happen when he went to war? Very small army, right? So Gideon had 32,000 soldiers, and God said, no, this is too many, because if you defeat the Midianites with an army of 32,000, you're going to take glory for yourself. And Israel will say that they did this by themselves, right? So he said, well, we want to reduce this army down to 300, right? So that when you go and fight against the Midianites and you have victory, you can never claim glory for yourself. You can never say that this was because of you, right? So again, it's the same idea that God uses weakness to accomplish great things, so that those who are weak never say, well, this was because of me, okay? The same here is true of Samson. Even though he doesn't have an army, right? Even though he doesn't have any war that's really going on at this point beyond just his own personal vendetta against the Philistines. But you look at somebody like Samson and who he is and the lifestyle that he lives, and you don't say in the end that he's like he has any discipline in his actions, right? And you say, how is it that he was able to defeat the Philistines, making one wrong decision after another? Again, it's only because God was working. It's not because he's such a great tactician or military leader or anything. Okay. So here all the fields are on fire. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite." That's his wife's father. "Because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. Right? So they weren't happy either, huh? Samson said to them, "Since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will cease." Okay, what does St. Augustine say about this? He says, that companion who married Samson's wife, now again, if you remember last time, we gave an analogy as the church fathers look at this story. And in this story, Samson is a representative of Christ, okay? And the woman who married him is a representative of who?
The church.
The church. It's like the church is marrying Christ, okay? And Samson told a secret to his wife, which was what?
Like the faith.
The riddle, right? Yeah, we haven't gone to the strength yet, right? Yeah. So the answer to the riddle was the secret that Samson gave to his wife, and the church is saying like this is like the salvation, like the secret of salvation that the church is giving to us. Then his wife went and told this secret to everybody, and that's a symbol of what? Preaching, evangelizing, like telling the world that this is like the message of salvation, right? Which we received from God. That was the analogy, okay? So we're going to continue that analogy here. And what St. Augustine is saying. He says, that companion who married Samson's wife is a symbol of all heretics. Why would that be, right? So the church was married to Christ, and then instead she went and married another man. Right? That other man is like, it's like idol worshiping, right? It's like I'm married to someone else. I've become a heretic. I've become separated from Christ. It is indeed a great secret, O brethren. The heretics who intend to divide the church wish to get married to the Lord's bride and to take her away. Through their dissent from church and the Gospels, by their evil, namely by their adultery, they attempt to acquire the church as their portion. Hence, Paul, the apostle, the faithful minister, and the friend of the Lord's bride, says, "For I have betrothed you to one husband, that I may present you as a chaste virgin to Christ." And with a jealousy of faith, he adds, "But I fear, lest somehow, as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ Jesus." Okay? Now let us see the secret work Samson has done. When he was wronged by his companion in the person of his wife, he took the foxes, about which it is written in the book of Songs, "Catch us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines." Saying catch, he means to keep them from corrupting the vines of the church. By saying catch the foxes, he means condemn the heretics by the authority of the divine law, hasten to chain them by the testimony of the holy book. Okay, so again, it's following this parallel, this analogy. In the church fathers like to use a lot of allegory, a lot of analogies, right? And they look into the different events that happen in the Bible, and they see them at many levels, not just the level of here's a historical event that happened, not just at the level of morality, what can we learn from this story, but at a level that's like this spiritual level where they see analogies and prophecies in it about Christ and about the church. Okay, so this is the way that St. Augustine here is seeing this story. So he attacked them hip and thigh with a great slaughter. Then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. So he went and he attacked these people. Okay. Now the Philistines went up and camped in Judah and deployed themselves against Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" So they answered, "We have come up to arrest Samson, to do to him as he has done to us." Okay, so Samson went into the land of Judah, right? Because he was when he got married, he was married in the land of the Philistines. Okay, and he went there. He is now back in the land of Judah. The Philistines are now coming after him. Okay, they're coming to get revenge on him. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock of Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this you have done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." Okay, so he's saying I'm essentially paying them back for the injustice that they did to me. Okay, so here, what is it that these people, these Israelites, what is it that they're saying to Samson?
We're afraid.
And why are they afraid?
Well, like, why did you make them mad? Like, you know that they rule over us, so they can harm us anyway.
Right. So they're essentially wanting to say, don't rock the boat, Samson. Don't get them upset at us because they're powerful. They rule over us. They can come and harm us. And you are just making them upset. Right? So you see, nobody saw Samson as a liberator. Nobody saw Samson as a leader. Nobody saw Samson as like, hey, Samson is the one that is going to grant us victory over the Philistines. They see Samson as like a troublemaker. It's like, why are you going and doing this? Okay. But they said to him, "We have come down to arrest you, that we may deliver you into the hand of the Philistines." Right? Like that's to the degree that they just want peace with the Philistines, is they say, we're just going to take you, okay, and give you to the Philistines. Right? Because if we give you to the Philistines, that's what they're looking for. They're going to leave us alone. They're going to treat us well, and there's nothing bad is going to happen. Right? This reminds us of verse in John 11:50, where the high priest is prophesying, and he says, "It is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and not that the whole nation should perish." Right. This is essentially what they're doing. It's like, we are going to give you up to the Philistines so that we can be spared. Okay. So what did Samson say? It says, "Then Samson said to them, 'Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves.'" It's like, okay, I will deliver myself to you. I'll allow you to do this, but you promise me you are not going to kill me yourselves, but you're actually going to deliver me over to the Philistines. So they spoke to him, saying, "No, but we will tie you securely and deliver you into their hand, but we will surely not kill you." And they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. When he came to Lehi, this is where the Philistines were, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were on his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. Okay, flax is like a plant that's used to make like cloth, like textiles. Right, so he was able to, break free from these ropes, and now he was dangerous. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it, and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men." And so it was, when he had finished speaking, that he threw the jawbone from his hand, and he called the place Ramath Lehi. Right? Ramath Lehi means jawbone hill. Okay. So a very interesting weapon that he found, a jawbone of a donkey, and again, like, he's so strong, right? It's like he used that to kill 1,000 people, okay, of the Philistines. So you see, the level of animosity between him and the Philistines is increasing, right? And how did this all start? It all started because of the riddle. Like, I think you asked last time about what's the significance of the lion and the
Yeah.
okay? Like, that was the occasion for the conflict that began all of this. Then he became very thirsty. So he cried out to the Lord and said, You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised?" So God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank, and his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore he called its name En Hakor, that means fountain of prayer, which is in Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Okay, so he has now gained more prominence, right? He's killed a substantial number of the Philistines. Okay, and people are now seeing him like, okay, this is the judge. This is the one God has chosen. He judged for 20 years. Any questions so far? Okay. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there, and went into her. When the Gazites were told, Samson has come here, they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. They were quiet all night, saying, in the morning, when it is daylight, we will kill him. Okay? So what is... He's going back again, right? Where's Gaza?
In the land of the Philistines.
In the land of the Philistines. Okay? So he's going back there, and he's seeing who? A harlot. He's like falling into the same trap again. He goes to the land of the Philistines. He sees a harlot there. He's attracted to her. The Philistines see that he has come and say Samson has come, and so they like are ready to ambush him. Right? They still want to kill him. Saint Ambrose, he said this. He said, Samson, who had overcome the lion, could not overcome his evil desire. He who tore the ropes of his enemies could not tear the ropes of his lust. He who burned the shocks and the standing grain of the enemies was burnt by the fire of the forbidden lust kindled by a single woman. Right? So as much as Samson had all of this external strength, that he overcame the lion, that he tore off the ropes, that he burned all of the crops and the grain and everything of the people, that he killed so many Philistines, even though he had so much external strength. But when it came to the internal strength, when it came to like his self-discipline, he was very weak. Right? He was very weak. And the thing that caused his downfall, the thing that kept causing him to fall into problems, was his internal weakness. Right? It wasn't because he was externally weak. It was because he was internally weak. And certainly that is what we suffer from. Right? Our poor choices that we make because of our weaknesses, our lack of discipline, our lack of self-control, those are the things that most of the time cause us problems. And Samson lay low till midnight. Then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. This is like unbelievable strength. He picked up the entire gate of the city and he put it on his back. I don't even know how that's possible, but that's what it says. Okay? He picked up the entire gate of the city and he carried it up to the top of a hill. Right? So the people were like in ambush, right? They were like waiting for him. They're thinking that they can overcome him. How do you overcome somebody like this? Like this is not possible to defeat somebody like this. Okay? This is like superhero Samson. Okay? Afterward, it happened that he loved a woman in the Valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. Okay? So while it was impossible to attack Samson physically, while it was impossible, right? But more and more we see the weakness that Samson has, right? And so he had this vulnerability. This was his vulnerability. This lust that he had was his vulnerability. If you remember, we talked about this before in the story of Balaam. Okay? Do you remember the story of Balaam? Balaam the prophet, who was asked by Barak to do something. This is in the book of Numbers, I think, yes. So in the book of Numbers, there's this story about Barak, who was a king of I believe it was the Midianites, and he wanted this prophet Balaam to curse the people. Okay, this is the time when the Israelites were wandering for 40 years in the desert, and he wanted Balaam to curse the people, right? Because he knew that he was blessed by God. They were blessed by God, these people. So he says that God is the source of their strength, so I want this prophet to curse the people. And so in the end, Balaam, he couldn't curse them. He says, I cannot curse those people whom God has blessed, okay? So in the end, what is it that they did to overcome the people? Is they had them to fall into sexual immorality with the Midianite women. That was the means by which they were able to cause the Israelites to fall. So because they could not physically defeat the Israelites, Because anytime we'd go and fight against the Israelites, God would grant them victory. So the way that the people got them to be weak and to fail, it was essentially to destroy their connection with God, to cause them to disobey God and to break their connection with God through their own immorality. Okay, and it was successful, and this is what they did, right? So you see this, like, it's kind of the theme of this, like, is teaching us that with God, no enemy can destroy us. This is what he's saying. The devil, who is the greatest enemy, cannot destroy us when we are with God, right? No external power can destroy us when we are with God, right? Nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. Nothing can take us from the hand of the Father. Nothing can remove us from the place that God has appointed to us, except for we ourselves. I myself am the only one that can choose by my own will to be weak, to be separated from God because of my choices, because of my decisions, not something that's against my will from the outside, not an external thing, but from an internal choice, right? Samson, who was the judge, who was so strong that he could pick up the gates of a city, okay? And yet when it came time for him to, compromise with sin, and even knowing that all of his strength is coming from God, how easy was it for him time and time again to go with harlots, to go with women, to go with whoever, right? Because that was his lust, that was his weakness, his desire for pleasure, right? That was his weakness. And so he forsook his identity, he forsook his position, he forsook his strength, he forsook everything for the sake of the lust that he had, right? And again, this tells us something about the power of temptation, right? Because in the moments of temptation, we are willing to do anything. We will do anything, even if it's completely against our nature, even if it destroys the rest of our life. People are willing to make such poor choices in the midst of temptation, right? Because it's like kind of like a drunken state of not thinking rationally about the choices that we're making. And certainly we see this happening with Samson. You think someone like Samson on your team, then you would be able to destroy the rest of the world. There's nothing that could stop you, right? But his kryptonite, the one thing that really stopped him wasn't any external power. It was his own decisions. It was his own lust. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her, because now everybody understands Samson, right? Everybody knows his weakness. They know that they can't defeat him. I mean, these like acts of power that he's doing in front of them. It's like, who would dare to even go up to him, right? But they know his weakness now. Okay, so the lords of the Philistines, they came up to Delilah and they said to her, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. Right? The lords of the Philistines, there was 5 lords of all of the major cities in Philistine, and they all came together and they told her, we're each going to give you 1,100 pieces of silver, just tell us how to overpower him. Right? And the reason that she had occasion to undermine him and to betray him was because he allowed her to come close to him, right? As long as we keep the enemy far away, there would have been no way for them to discover his strength, the reason of his strength, or how to undermine him, or how to, make him to be weak. No one would have been able to determine that. But because of Samson's own choice of bringing the enemy, the Philistines, close to him, being even like in union with her, it is through that the whole force of the enemy, the whole Philistine army, all of the Philistines are now able to like play him like a puppet. They're able to use him. They're able to diminish him. They're able to destroy him, right? Again, it wasn't because the Philistines are so powerful. It was because he allowed them in, right? The same with us. When we allow temptation in, when we allow the devil in, when we don't fight against him, it can overpower us. Even when we think that we are powerful and strong, and yet the devil finds our vulnerabilities. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies and with what you may be bound to afflict you. Okay, so she's asking him this question. And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So what is he telling her?
A lie.
A lie. Now, why would he lie to her?
Past experience.
past experience. So does Samson trust her? He doesn't trust her. So he chose to be with this woman. He doesn't even trust her. It's 100% for self-fulfillment. There is no love in this relationship whatsoever. He just enjoys being with her, okay? And he knows he can't even trust her. So he is bringing this person, whom he knows he cannot trust, whom he knows is a source of evil, as close to him as possible. And he thinks, well, you know what? I'm Samson. I'm the most powerful person in the world. I can be, in this relationship. I can satisfy myself in this relationship. And in the end, I'm 100% in control. I'm Samson. There's no one can stop me. Who can stop me? You can imagine someone as strong as this, like it gets to your head, think I'm invincible. I'm nothing can stop me. Okay? So he lies to her because he kind of understands that she's trying to find out the secret for a reason. Maybe he doesn't fully know what the reason is, but I mean, he's smart enough to realize that she's not exactly an ally to him, right? So the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, and she bound him with them. Now men were lying in wait, staying with her in the room, and she said to him, "The Philistines are upon you, Samson." But he broke the bowstrings as a strand of yarn breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. Okay, so if Samson was a rational, logical, in control of himself type person at this point, then you would think that when I just revealed to somebody that, if you tie me with 7 fresh bowstrings, then I will lose my strength, and then like after that, my wife comes and ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings, and then immediately the Philistines that are hiding in my room jump out and they attack me, you would think that that would be enough to say, oh, well, maybe she's lying to me, or maybe she is, like he knows that she's lying to him. Right? Wouldn't that be enough to say, get away from me? Wouldn't that be enough to say, I don't ever want to see you again? Like you would imagine. And actually, many people ask this question. It's like, it seems so obvious. Like, why is it that Samson wouldn't just tell her, get out? Okay? But this again tells us something about sin. How many times do we toy with sin that we've toyed with in the past, and we know that it's going to lead down the same road that we've been led down in the past? We know we're going to fall in the same way that we fell in the past. We know everything is going to happen exactly like it is in the past, and yet somehow we do it anyway, right? So we ourselves are guilty of the same thing that Samson is so, in a kind of almost comedic, comical way, that when you read this, right, and we look at it and we're like, that's so silly, like that's so ridiculous that someone would actually do that. Maybe from a physical way, yes, but this is teaching us a spiritual lesson about us spiritually, that we allow the enemy to be as close to us as possible, perhaps by toying with sin, by doing things that are very tempting, and that when we fall, we're like surprised that it happened, right? It is his own choice. He now has all the evidence that he needs, even if before he had suspicions, but now he has proof that she is bad for him, that she is deceiving him, that she wants to destroy him, that she is not his friend, that she is working for the enemy. In every way, he knows this now. Okay? He knows that this is harmful. He knows this is sinful. He knows this is against God's command. He knows in every way this is bad. Okay? So what does he do? Then Delilah said to Samson, "Look, you have mocked me and told me lies. Now please tell me what you may be bound with."
This is being honest.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you think about this?
Not crazy.
It's crazy.
She's a good liar.
Is she?
Is she a good liar?
She's making it feel like it was his fault.
Like she's a victim.
She's turning it, yes. She's turning it and making it be like you're the one because you lied to me, right? It's you are wrong because you lied to me. But she's so brazen in the sense that immediately after this happens, she asks him the question again. Now tell me for real, okay, how you may be bound, okay? So and again, like someone who is objective that looks at a scene like this can immediately identify that it's ridiculous, okay? The problem is that when we are not objective and we are in the situation and we are so attached with lust towards something, right? We cannot see it this way. And people will come to us and say, can't you see that you're like making these poor choices? Can't you see that you're doing the wrong thing? Can't you see? But we're so emotionally attached to whatever decision that we're making that we cannot see, right? And this is who Samson is right now. He doesn't see. He you know, he does he enjoys being with her so much that he kind of disregards everything else. It's like, yeah, you know, I'm Samson, you know, I'm strong. So he said to her, if they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Okay. Now, actually, now that I read it, isn't this what didn't they say before that they bound him with new ropes? Isn't that what when they brought him to the Philistines, right? It said new ropes, right? Yeah, it did say new ropes. So they already tried the new ropes, okay, and the new ropes didn't work.
But that wasn't the Philistines.
No, but I mean, it was a repeat of something they already did, right? Thinking maybe the new ropes are really strong because they haven't been used before, and so the new ropes are going to be the things that hold him tight. So that's what he tells her. Therefore Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And when men were lying in wait, staying in the room, I don't even know how these men get in the room, or that like Samson doesn't detect that these people are in the room, but he broke them off his arms like a thread. And it's like Samson is like chill about everything. You know, like to him, it's like, no one can touch me. Like, I'm so powerful. Okay? Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me what you may be bound with. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head into the web of the loom. It's almost he's toying with her now. Like, you know. So she wove it tightly with the batten of the loom and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the batten and the web from the loom. Okay. Okay. And he's falling into the same thing again. Then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies. Okay. So what is she doing now? She's continually pestering him, right? She is very persistent. She's continuing to pester him. She's making him feel like somehow it's your fault, like you're not being honest with me, you're not telling me. Again, this is the way the devil tricks us. Maybe the first temptation, we say no. And the second temptation, we say no. And the third temptation, we say no. But what after 1,000 temptations? What about after 1,000 times of the same exact attack over and over? And the reason the attack is happening is because we are putting ourselves in a position where we may be attacked. And every time it's like, no, I'm strong. I can take it. No one is going to overcome me. I have my principles. I have this. I'm not going to do, anything wrong or whatever. And we put ourselves in that very compromising situation. And time after time after time, maybe yes, we are able to resist it, but our resistance is diminishing. It's fading. It's after a while, like we start to become fatigued and exhausted, right? And this is where Samson is at this point. Okay. And it came to pass when she pestered him daily with her words and pressed him, so that his soul was vexed to death.
Wow.
You think at this point he would just leave her? Like clearly, that's all she cares about is to destroy him. Clearly, like there is nothing good he's receiving from this other than the physical pleasure that he's having with her. That's it. And yet that was so strong and so desirable for him that he was willing to put himself through all of this just for that, right? That's how the power of lust. His soul was vexed to death, that he told her all his heart and said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. Okay? So, he gave away his secret. He gave away completely his strength. When Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all his heart. So the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hand. Remember, they said they were going to give her 1,100 pieces of silver, each of them. Okay? So, this is the persistence of Satan. This is his persistence. Why is this important? Because we are judged according to how we end the race, not how we begin. Right? Even if we are so faithful at the beginning, and even if we run with perseverance for a long time, if by the end we have become so whittled away and so beaten down and so compromised and so willing to give in to sin and temptation, that what is our state in the end? What is our state in the end? This is why we are called always to be watchful. You know, like in the midnight hour prayer in the Agbeya, the whole prayer is about being watchful and alert because we do not know when the Son of Man is coming. We don't know when the Master of the house is coming. We don't know when the judgment day is coming. So saying, be always watchful, be always alert, be always disciplined, be always ready, be always repenting, be always confessing, be always struggling, be always fasting, be always praying, be always doing everything because you have no idea when the day will come. And this is here Samson, who thought himself to be so strong. At the end, he gave up his strength, right? Because he put himself in an environment where he could not overcome. This strong man was overcome by this harlot woman, right? And she has no strength compared to him. And yet she was stronger than all the Philistines. She was stronger than everyone that ever came against him because she infiltrated him. She used his weakness against him. And this is again how the devil uses us. He uses our weakness against us. He seeks to destroy us by finding the weakness that we have and very slowly, very gradually, like, hitting that same point again and again and again for years and for decades, right? And so he says what Christ said, he who endures to the end will be saved. He who endures to the end, not he who endures for 50 years. He who endures to the very end is the one who will be saved. And that's why with everything that Samson did, he was very foolish. Because he thought himself so strong that he would endure to the end. He thought to himself, I will never lose here. I will always be strong. I will never give up my secret, because obviously she tried many times, beyond number. It didn't even tell us. Like, it only mentioned those first three times. But then after that, it said she kept pestering him. How many times did she ask him? How many times did she annoy him? Until he finally got so sick of it, that instead of saying, you know what, I'm going to leave you, instead he said, no, I'm going to give in to you. I'm going to give you what you're asking of me. This is the attachment to pleasure and lust. Then she lulled him to sleep on her knees, and called for a man, and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. Okay. What does St. Augustine say about this? He says, let us, beloved brethren, beware as much as we can, lest we would spiritually suffer what Samson physically did. Let us understand the mind as being a symbol of the man Samson, and the body as a symbol of the woman Delilah. If a man brings himself into subjection to his body and plunges in pleasures, he will suffer from his body as Samson did from the woman. Therefore, beloved brethren, it is befitting of us, by the help of God, to strive to realize the saying of the apostle, I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. This is a very powerful verse, and every time I read it and I think about it, it's frightening. St. Paul is the one who went to all the world, and he preached to everyone the message of God, the message of salvation. Everything. He suffered, he did so much for the service of God that he did, and he was stoned, and he was shipwrecked, and he was hungry, and people attacked him, and all of this, okay? And he is the one who said, I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. Are all the words that we say about God and all the things that we teach about God and all the things that we promote about God, is that something that I myself live or not? Do I discipline my body? It's not just enough that I know the Bible and that I can teach and give lessons and all that. Do I practice this? Do I live this? St. Paul says he has to discipline his body, just as here we see when Samson did not have this discipline, he gave in to his flesh, who is symbolized here by Delilah. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times and shake myself free. but he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. You see how he had so relied upon his strength, and he took everything so lightly. I'm strong. I can. This is a beneficial relationship to me because I can get what I want out of it, and I have the strength to keep from falling into the real problem, or to keep from falling into disaster and destruction while all these Philistines that are coming to attack me. I can have what I want. I'm able to protect myself from the bad consequences of it, and everything is fine. Until the one time when now he tries to go and protect himself, and he finds what? The Lord had departed from him. The whole time, his strength was coming from the Lord. And the whole time, he was toying with sin, right? Which was against the Lord, right? Saying, when we sometimes think that we have it all together and we have it, we're doing well and we're successful, but that success is coming from the Lord. So here the Lord said, sorry, you now are having to deal with this by yourself. Do you have the strength now to deal with this? You have been toying with this for however long, enjoying the sin that you've been sinning. Now, I am not going to save you. I am not going to give you the strength, right? Because you gave up the secret of your strength. You chose this. You chose to give it up. You chose to be weak. Okay? And so God departed from him, and he was not able to overcome. Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. However, the hair of his head began to grow again after it had been shaven. He became blinded. Like that's the extent of how he suffered, right? Because of the sin. Right? He became blind. They gouged out his eyes. St. Augustine says, indeed, our enemy, the devil, strongly mocks the sinners when they come to lose the grace of Jesus. As it happened when Samson lost his hair, he made them lose their vision, but put them in prison, turned them into animals that go round and around grinding grain. Right? This is what St. Augustine is saying. It's like this is the state that now this mighty man Samson has become this slave. Blind slave, right? All because of the work of the devil. We think that the devil is not strong. Here you see the strength of the devil, who has been so patiently attacking Samson for so long because he only has to be victorious once, right? Now the lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, our God has delivered into our hands Samson, our enemy. When the people saw him, they praised their God, for they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, and the one who multiplied our dead. Okay, so they believe now that by defeating Samson, like they have defeated God, right? Because Samson represents God here. And in the minds of these pagans, they're thinking, well, our God, Dagon, is actually stronger than the God of Israel because we were able to overcome God's judge, right? Samson. So it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson that he may perform for us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he performed from them, and they stationed him between the pillars. Then Samson said to the lad who held him by the hand, let me feel the pillars which support the temple so that I can lean on them. Now the temple was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, about 3,000 men and women on the roof watching while Samson performed. So this was like a huge assembly of Philistines. All the lords of the Philistines were there, which were like the top leaders of the Philistines. Then Samson called to the Lord, saying, O Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars which supported the temple, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. What is he going to do?
Destroy the temple.
He's going to destroy the temple. He's asking God to give him strength so that he can destroy the temple, and with the destruction of this temple, all of these Philistines all at once. Now again, that is his goal in the end. His role as a judge is to destroy the Philistines, the enemies of Israel. And if you remember at the very beginning of the book of Judges, I think in Judges chapter 2, we read about how the only reason that these enemies existed in the vicinity of Israel is because when God led his people into the promised land, they refrained from destroying them all. God had given them the command and the strength, the authority to destroy all of the enemies that were in that area. And after a while of destroying them, they're like, okay, well, we're strong enough. We don't have to go destroy everybody. We can get taxes from some and tributes from some, and some of them can be our slaves, some of this. Like, we're benefiting from our power in the midst of all these people, so we don't have to destroy them all, and they didn't, right? And so God said to them, because you did not destroy all of your enemies, they will be a thorn to you. They will be a snare to you. They will be a source of oppression to you for the rest of your days. And that's certainly what's happened, right? These Philistines now are doing this. So here, this consequence that, all of the people, and here specifically Samson, are experiencing is again because of their choices of not having cut out these people which represent sin. They didn't cut out the sin, and now they are suffering the consequences of sin. And here, very literally, Samson is. Here you see Samson is, maybe humbled from where he was at the beginning, realizing now that he is not as strong as he imagined himself to be, and that God was the only source of his strength. And he's saying this is the first time now that we hear Samson praying in the whole book, right? But the first time Samson is praying and he's saying is remember me. Like, remember me. Like, he's thinking about God, he's praying to God, he's still asking, even despite all that's happened, is he wants to fulfill his role as judge, by God granting him strength. And maybe now this is the first selfless act that we see Samson do throughout the whole book. Okay? Throughout the whole story, Samson was only thinking about what brought him pleasure, right? What brought him some kind of joy. And he was disregarding essentially all the other roles and duties that he had as a judge and a Nazirite for the sake of whatever it is that he wanted. I want the honey in the lion's carcass, I'm going to take it. It doesn't matter whether as a Nazirite I'm not supposed to have it or not. Oh, I'm supposed to destroy the Philistines? I don't care. I'm going to go marry a Philistine. I'm going to go have a relationship with a Philistine harlot. Essentially, he wants to do everything according to his own will. And he's not really thinking at all about what is his actual role in being judged. Okay? We don't see him praying to God. We don't see him really focusing at all on anything that's important other than himself. Okay? Here now in his last days, the first time we hear him to pray, the first time he's now thinking not about what is good for Samson anymore. Like, he's thinking now about something else. He's saying the destruction of the Philistines is actually good for the people. Okay? Then Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his might, and the temple fell on the lords and all the people who were within it. So the dead that he killed at his death were more than he had killed in his life. You have a question?
Well, I'm just going to say, in verse 28, he says that he wants to kill them with one blow, like to take vengeance for his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You said it was a selfless act. That seems pretty selfish to me. He's focusing on his eyes, not like his plan.
I mean, it's true that, he definitely does say that, right? But I think there's more going on in him than just personal vendetta. Because, it is the first time we hear him to pray. And he has been for, it's not clear how long it was, but, maybe a few months or something like that, in this state, like giving him time to think about what it is all that's happened. Because remember, at the end, Samson is counted as one of the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. Okay? So there's definitely much more to him than just the portrayal of, I'm a selfish person that all I care about is, pleasure and selfish things, because otherwise he wouldn't be mentioned as one of the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. So we do see him as someone who did fulfill his role, that God was able to work in him despite a lot of the bad choices. And that's one of the important things we learn in the book of Judges, is that none of the judges were perfect. A lot of them had flaws and deep flaws, and yet God was still able to use those people. And through the process, we hope that they learn. It says, and his brothers and all his father's household came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father Manoah. He had judged Israel 20 years. Okay, so Samson is a very mixed character. We see a lot of the weaknesses that he portrayed, and we see a lot of the blessing that God gave him, and we see that in the end God did use him for the destruction of the Philistines as he was called, but it was in a very different way than maybe all of the other judges that came before. Samson was not like a military leader. He was not used by God in that way, but God was able to use him despite his own mistakes and shortcomings to like accomplish this mission that God wanted him to do. Do you have any comments or questions about Samson? Okay. Glory be to God forever. Yes.
What is the role of the judge again?
What is the role of the judge?
Yeah.
So in this,
Judges.
yeah, so in the pattern that we see in the book of Judges, so the pattern essentially was the people of Israel began to sin against God, began to worship idols because all of these enemies, all of these other pagan peoples that are in the vicinity of Israel are a negative influence on the Israelites. So they begin to see their idols and their pagan gods and all these things, and they intermarry with them. They begin to worship their gods and so on. And so the people fall into a state of apostasy. That's like the first phase. The second phase is God, in order to bring them back, causes their enemies to conquer them for some period of time. And they essentially become slaves for that period of time. That's the second phase. After that second phase, at some point, the people turn back to God, cry out to him for help. Okay, and then God will raise up a leader who is, we call a judge. Okay, he's not like a judge the way we understand the word judge today. Judge is somebody who was like the leader of the people, not a king, but someone whom God raised up for the purpose of freeing the Israelites from their enemies. And the judge would do something, whether it be like a military campaign or something, to destroy the enemies, restore Israel again to being liberated, and then the people live for a period of time in peace and union with God and worshiping God, until at some point the judge dies, and at the next generation the people fall back into sin again, and the whole cycle keeps repeating over and over and over. So that's the overall theme of the book of Judges, the same cycle that keeps happening again and again. So Samson and this story was just one example of these phases where the people had sinned against God. God raised up the Philistines against them, and then after a period of time, when the people repented, he made Samson to be a judge to conquer the Philistines. Okay, let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank you, O God, for this day. We ask you, O Lord, that you keep us safe from sin, and let us to learn from the story of Samson and Delilah that we should not toy with sin or think that we are strong enough to resist it. In whatever way, O Lord, that is within our power, help us to flee from sin as Joseph the righteous did. Help us to stay away, O Lord, from sinful influences. Help us, O Lord, not to think that we are strong enough to resist all of the temptations that are around us all the time. Help us, O Lord, to remain faithful to you, and help us to seek holiness and righteousness, and to stay away from wickedness. Help us, O Lord, to see that even in our weaknesses and even in our shortcomings, that you are able to use us to do your glory and to do your will. Grant us, O Lord, a desire to serve you, to do according to your will, not only to seek our selfish motives, to seek what is good for us personally, but what is good for the glory of your kingdom. Teach us, O God, how to have a desire to serve you, and how, O Lord, to come to you in repentance every time that we fall into sin. Guard us and protect us, and be with your holy church, O Lord, in this place and in every place, and help us to, O Lord, be a beacon of light, so that those who live in darkness can come to know you. Through the prayers of St. Mary, Archangel Michael, St. Paul, St. Mark, and all your saints, hear us as we pray thankfully. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory forever and ever. Amen. The love of God the Father, the grace of the only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, and the communion and the gift of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Go in peace. The peace of the Lord be with you all. Amen.